Welcome to Chautauqua People. Our guest today is Thomas Brownfield, who serves as administrator of the Disciples House at Chautauqua Institution. He is currently serving on the 6th and final year of a 5-year commitment. Tom is a native of Columbus, Ohio, who had 3 majors while a student at The Ohio State University. He had a career in data processing with an Ohio firm and a near miss with 2 employers who went under shortly after they were thinking of striking up an arrangement with him, Honeywell and Lehman, shortly before he was to have joined them. During his career, he built 4 major computing rooms. At one time, he had a photography business with a heavy emphasis on weddings. Prior to studying at the Methodist Theological School, he had always been an amateur theologian. He is commissioned in the United Church of Christ. He has always had an interest in social justice and interfaith matters. His theology had a fast and furious development with a new father-in-law, who announced that you are the first pastor I've had since graduating from divinity school. He spent as long as 3 hours just sitting on the Chautauqua bench discussing theology with new friends. Tom's ideas of social justice come from his theology, Romans 5:20. Can you tell us about that?
Well, sure. The idea of picking a place in Scripture to base the principles of your ministry on is an old and honored tradition. And the committee that was guiding me into the ministry was asking me what particular scripture would I use. Well, I looked at a whole lot of the justice, the typical social justice pieces that you could use, something from Amos, let justice roll down like the waters and righteousness like the ever-flowing stream. And you could pick something from Micah, what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Those are all good quotes, but they didn't capture the imperative that I felt that was really motivating me to do this justice ministry. And I was sitting thinking about it and worrying about it, and I picked up Paul Tillich's book on, which he calls the shaking of the foundations, which is a whole bunch of his more important sermons put into book form. And I happened to open the one that he wrote called You Are Accepted, and it was based on Romans 5:20, which is the verse that says that basically law came in, law was given, law became your responsibility, so that sin abounded. But that grace abounded more through Jesus Christ. And Tillich, in his take on that, distilled it down to the notion that you are accepted by God. And that's you with a capital Y, that's everybody. It's not believers, that's not anybody committed to the same things you are, that's everybody. So that seemed to me to guide me to look at it as, if that's true, if I accept that, then how can I ever turn my back on anybody when I see them being wronged or being abused or being left out? And that guided me into that. So that became the crux of my ministry.
Now, social ministry is somewhat of a contemporary term, but it sounds like that was the focus of your belief structure and sense of obligation well before it became trendy.
Well, I think so.
What led to that?
Well, I think largely it was from my father and his family. My mother's family was a bunch of Welsh preachers who were very much, being Welsh, they were very concerned about how the common people could exist, maybe with the help of, but more with despite perhaps the effects of the elites. And so we developed a notion in our family that what our responsibility was is to care for those who couldn't care for themselves, learn from those who needed to teach us something so we could speak for them, and to then go out of our way to be sure that they were heard. And that, to me, is the essence of the justice ministry, is to capture those moments in your life where you're facing a situation where you see a friend, you see an enemy, you see someone you've never met being abused by the system, and you say, I can't take that. I can't allow that. I have to do something about that. So that's how that happened.
Now, I got to nitpick here because I know we have one very significant Welsh viewer. Were the Welsh downtrodden or abused, or where did
Yes.
you make the connect? Can you tell me a little more about that?
Well, we Welsh are known to sing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that I was given by a Welsh historian for that is the Welsh were kept in such a position of poverty they could never afford instruments. So they never built a band. They always had a choir. They used the instrument they had. And they sang on the way to the mines. They sang on the way home. They sang in the fields, and they sang in the pubs. And their songs, if you listen to the Welsh hymns, are all in a minor key. They're not exultant, they're not cheerful, they're not happy. They're thinking of there must be a better time, there must be a better way, there must be a better option for them. And it didn't happen in their lives. And they saw that all around them. From the town that my mother's folks came from in Wales, which is Aberyron in western Wales, 5,000 people a week in that year left Wales to come to the United States.
How big was the town?
The town was maybe 1,500 people.
That became a transit point then.
Yeah, people came and people came and people came because they had to leave. They couldn't live on what they could make, what they could grow. So they had a real sense that there was something better somewhere else. When they got here, my great-great-grandmother, who had instigated the coming of her family at 72 years old, told her children that you will not teach your grandchildren and great-grandchildren to speak Welsh. That has kept us second class before. It will not keep us second class now. So they had this sense that they were looking for something better.
Were there any secret Welsh speakers in subsequent generations?
Oh, yeah. Some of them are fairly sneaky. I know a little bit, but I can't pretend to speak fluent Welsh. But I've sung all the hymns in Welsh.
Mm-hmm. Have you traveled to Wales?
Yes. Yeah, I've been there 3 times, and amazingly, in one of the trips, my mother and I found a second cousin of hers, and I took a picture of the two sitting on a sofa, and it looked like sisters.
Really?
And it was just amazing to be in that place and see that.
How different was the age?
They were about 6 months apart.
Oh, so they were right on.
Yeah.
And how was the emotions between the two?
They both sat there at the start of the conversation as they looked at each other and looked in their eyes and they saw tears because they just couldn't believe that was what would happen. And it was to me, I just didn't know how to handle it.
Wow. And your mother then, I assume, kept in touch with us.
We did. The lady died. Her daughter, who I was in contact with, died sometime thereafter. And so we did lose track, but it was really an amazing time.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I've traveled, but never encountered somebody like that. Now, you spoke earlier about some global moments of charity, and they were very significant in forming your belief structure. Could you tell me a little bit about those? And there was something about, for example, your age 14, you were sitting in church.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, those, what one of my idols, Marcus Borg, called golden moments. I was 14 years old. I was sitting in church listening to our pastor give a sermon on judge not, that ye be not judged.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never thought through the ramifications of that, to the extent that I came in that moment to realize that it wasn't asking me to be stupid about not separating evildoers from society or protecting oneself. That's not what it was about. But it was about the notion that none of us is competent to sit in God's judgment of someone else. And that we must all push that out of our minds. Think that that's not my role. And suddenly, in that moment, I felt a weight, physical weight, lift off my shoulders. And the light around me became golden. And I felt this point of being kind of at one with a universal thing. Now, I've never had an image or idea of God as someone sitting on a throne or a king kind of view. But I've always thought that God is everywhere and in everything and everyone, and everything is in God. Therefore, when I came to that realization that I wasn't required to be in substitution for God, it was something that just said to me that there's much work I can do without any worry about whether I'm doing it for the worthy or the unworthy. It's whoever has need.
Indeed. Now, with this in hand, we have some very bad actors in society today, and one of them we talked about was Dylan Klebold, who sat in a prayer meeting in Charleston, South Carolina, and then the 10 folks, and then pulled a handgun out at the end and murdered all of them. And I indicated I have great difficulty with such people. How do you relate? No easy questions on this.
Well, I have great difficulty relating to someone like that, obviously. I mean, to try to put yourself in the position of another, which to me is the expression of empathy, right? That I can't do that with someone who harbors that kind of hate, who harbors, I think, truthfully, harbors that kind of fear. That his time, his social milieu is going away. That the white Protestant domination is ending. That's why I think you see the signs in some of these white nationalist demonstrations, a big sign with a 42 on it. Well, 42, that's supposedly the year that white males will no longer be the dominant number. But white people will no longer be the majority of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And to an awful lot of people, that's a very frightening thing. And so when I try to understand a Dylan Roof, I really can't get there. But I can honestly say that my understanding of him isn't necessary to recognize that he's a creature of God. And that in that I have to respect his humanity, even though I don't understand how he's warped it into something so evil. I just can't go there. On the other hand, it's like a lot of other things. Is it necessary for me to understand the way a gay person feels for me to grant respect to that person? Is it necessary for me to put myself and understand myself in the position of a woman who's struggling for me to respect and give that woman the dignity that I can? No, it's not. My understanding of that isn't necessary. So, yeah, it's very difficult. I was surprised, as I told you before, when exactly a week later, 7 days later, my co-workers from First Congregational Church who were working at Back Bay Mission in Biloxi, Mississippi, went to worship on that Wednesday night at the Missionary Baptist Church in Biloxi. And we were curious how we would be received. This little group of white people coming in to their church to worship with them a week after Dylan Roof had come in to kill. We were welcomed grandly with open arms. Mm-hmm. We were asked to join, the pastors of our group were asked to join in the prayers of the people. We were asked to fully participate in worship. And then they apologized to us because had it been Sunday, they'd serve us fried chicken and mashed potatoes. And they didn't have that on Wednesday evening. I think that is such open expression of love. And their senior pastor said, there's no way through these things without love.
Indeed.
And so he was an open expression of that. Well, to me, that was that's a real clutch point when you're trying to get yourself in gear to do something powerful. You say, there's why.
Indeed. Let's switch gears a little bit. And you gave me some very, in our pre-production, some very significant observations about the troubled and how we relate. I wonder if you could share such. One of them was, it's never about you.
Well, yeah, that's a little. That's one of the 4 agreements that I read the book by Ruiz, which is he calls it the Toltec wisdom, and the 4 agreements are very important. But I think one of the most important ones is it's never about you. And I've shared that with a number of people, and I counted up last night. I've given 57 copies of that book away.
Wow.
And one of them I gave away was to my cousin, who was having a lot of difficulty with her daughters, who didn't understand the struggles that she was going through as she raised them as a single mother, and had all sorts of other issues of because of her position. She was threatened and such. So they all 3 worked to read this and share it. And they came to the conclusion that they hadn't ever cut each other any slack, because they didn't, any of them, understand what was going on with the other in a deep sense. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that is so key to how do we react to somebody else. Somebody says something unpleasant, somebody says something maybe nasty. How do I react to that? My temptation is to come back with some smart aleck or equally nasty remark. But that's not the answer. That's not going to help me. It's not going to help them. So how do I accept what's going on with equanimity? Well, one thing is to remember, it's not about me. It's not. If I feel a personal attack, it's not about me. It's actually, I didn't know that person's wife said, I'm leaving you this morning. I didn't know that guy had an accident on the way to work. I didn't understand. I don't know any of that. So I have to accept whatever it goes and say, okay, what can I do with the information, not how do I react to the perception.
Mm-hmm. Some of the other points, one of them was authenticity.
Well, and always be authentic. I think he had a number of illustrations of what that means. But if you can, and it's very, very difficult, we all know that it's difficult to be authentic at all times, with all people, in all situations. It's very, very difficult. But we try to do that. One of the other ones was always do your best. And this one's become key to me as I've gotten older. Because my best in some of the stuff in my wood shop, for instance, my best isn't as good as it used to be. I hope my best will be better tomorrow if I'm better rested. And if I work a little harder, if I figure out a little better how to use that tool, my best will be better. But when I apply that to people, it applies equally. Am I tired? Have I not prepared? Have I been unwilling to listen to their side? And if any of those things are true, my best isn't going to happen. And so I have to be willing to take the risks to grow into my best every single day, but recognize that it may not be as good as yesterday.
That's it. And so we understand all of our limitations. Now, let me switch gears. One other point I wanted to talk with, a couple questions at the end. Your church membership is a very robust United Church of Christ, and the membership is huge. And many of the churches in the United Church of Christ, I understand about half of them have done some self-study, and they proclaim themselves to be open and affirming. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. The open and affirming protocol became central to the United Church of Christ over the recognition that we don't ever find ourselves in a position where rejecting someone because of their self-perception. In the case of gay, lesbian, transgender folks, I can't put myself in their place. I can't say you're wrong. I can't say that they're less human. What I can say is back to Romans 5:20. They are all children of God and are accepted by God. Who am I to reject them? And that's been the position of the United Church of Christ. We're not in a position to reject them. That's the core, basically, of the open and affirming protocols. And it's not limited, though, to LGBTQ+. It means people with mental health issues. It means people with physical issues. It means people who, it means people who, for some reason, have difficulty getting along with one another. It means accepting those who disagree with us theologically or whatever, which for a progressive theologian is very difficult sometimes. But the reality of that is one of the fundamental principles of progressive theology is that we accept all. And that's not with exceptions put in. That's total. One of the issues that comes up, though, when you become an open and affirming church and you write your covenant and you make it as broad as you can and you make it as inclusive as you can, and then you get your congregation to put their heads together and decide that's what they want to say about themselves, then is the time when you have to run it up on the flagpole. And in so doing, you say, this is a safe place. You have to broadcast that because there are so many people who cannot find a safe place. So we've taken the position that as an expression of God's love for others, we can say that. You will be safe here. And that, to me, is the core of living out your Christian faith.
Indeed. Now, how has a proclamation decision of being open and affirming related to the size of the membership of a church?
Well, when I did a study as part of one of the requests of the committee that was working with me on my ministry, of what churches in the UCC were growing, which churches were not. And the ones that are growing are the open and affirming and just economy churches.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the churches where people feel safe, people feel the commitment of the Christ figure. They see the example of Jesus lived out, and they say, I want to be part of that. We see the ones that are not growing as being, evidently from what I could find out, were the churches where it was all about me. This is all about my salvation. Right? This is all about, if I pray correctly, good things will happen. If I believe the right things, everything will be okay. But there's a fundamental recognition by a lot of us that that's not biblical.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus never said, worship the Bible and everything will be fine. Jesus never said, worship me. In fact, he said, don't worship me. He said, worship God. So when we look at it from that perspective and say, what allows a community to grow, it's by becoming a community.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot understand how we could be a true community without justice. And I can't understand how we would do justice without becoming a true community.
Indeed.
So those are two sides of the same coin.
One last question I always love to ask. A young Chautauquan comes to you, expresses an interest in having a career which exemplifies the beliefs we've talked about today. What would be your counsel?
Do it. When I sought to develop my ministry of social, my official title is Minister for Social Justice.
Mm-hmm.
I typically use leave the social out because I believe it's Minister for Justice in all its phases. But in the UCC, you become that minister by doing it. You don't say, I'm going to study for this and then I'll become that. So I tried to live that way in my business career.
Mm-hmm.
I had an occasion when the president of my company came and said, you got to get rid of a fellow because his health care is way too expensive because he and his wife have adopted a little girl who has many medical needs. He said, you just got to get rid of him. I said, you got to get rid of me. He said, what do you mean? I said, because I'm not going to do that. You have to do that. I will not. Because that's wrong. And he left my office and nothing was ever said again. But the question came to my mind as he stated the position. What's the proper thing to do here?
Indeed.
Do I protect myself or do I protect my employee?
And that was an easy decision.
That was a fairly easy decision.
We are out of time.
I'm sorry to hear that. I enjoyed talking with you.
This was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And I hope you'll come back and join me again.
I love talking with you.
You bet. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.